Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Lurker here, this is my first post. I have a few stories from when I was a student and employee at the Pittsburgh Jobcorps Center. Important background info. Jobcorps is a federally funded trade program run by the Department of Labor. It's for underprivileged young adults to get their GED and get certification classes for free to try and keep dropouts off the streets and off welfare. Being a welfare program, the building is falling apart due to underfunding. The buildings were built on the top of a mountain in 1915 and were originally used as a TB ward then in the 50s. It was made into an insane asylum, finally being given to the Department of Labor in the 80s. There are multiple ghosts known to haunt different parts of the buildings and grounds. Be me, 17-year-old dropout. Been on center for about 6 months now of the ghost stories, but never had an experience. Mid-January. Suffer severe migraines that make me seriously consider jumping every time I have one. 9 a.m., an hour into class, I feel a migraine coming on. Head to the wellness office to try and survive. Not supposed to, but the doc gets migraines too and feels bad, so he lets me sleep in one of the unused rooms. After about 3 grueling hours, I passed out. Wake up, it's like 11:30 p.m., all the lights are out, no one else is there. Lights out was at 10, so I'm in no rush to head back and get chewed out. Start slowly getting ready, put my boots on, put away my pillows and blankets. Start snooping around because screw it, why not? Going through patient files if other students. All of a sudden the temp drops like 10 degrees. I get chills and hit with a wave of unease that feels like I'm being watched. I've already learned to trust my gut. It saved me more than once. Fucking book it, slam my body into the door and burst out into the snow, like an inch or two. The wellness center is separated from all the other buildings down a steep-ass hill. I started the trek back a little shaken up, but I spend a lot of time in the deep woods, so I kinda used to the spookiness in the dark. A little after midnight now. Up ahead, just out of the tree line off the road, I see a little girl in a grayish or whitish dress. She's just skipping back and forth. I've heard stories about her. People see her occasionally out the windows of their rooms. It's nearly pitch black, except for a little moonlight, but for some reason I can see her and the area around her very clearly, all gray color scale, but I can make out way more than I should. She's paying no attention to me, so I just stay on the other side if the road getting close, ready to pass, just minding my business, looking straight ahead. Stupidly decide to take a quick look over my shoulder, back at her. End up looking her dead in the eyes. I freeze. I can't move and I can't look away. She has me stuck. Her face is expressionless. Her eyes had a weird glow like they gave off trace amounts of white light. I'll never forget those eyes. She maintains eye contact and walks up the side of the road until she is directly across from. Smiles this innocent but all too terrifying smile. Immediately get put into this trance and my life starts to flash before my eyes. I'm reliving my childhood, the time me and my friend Kay went crabbing, one of the best days of my life. Immediately when I was 10 and my parents got divorced, and the one and only time my dad got drunk and was ranting about my mom and how she wasted his life, and in a drunken rage turns to me and screams it was my fault and my sister's how it was our fault and beat me, is just back and forth from one of my best memories to one of my worst. All these memories being pulled in and out, forced around my mind. I'm powerless, I can't do anything. I hear yelling and it breaks the trance and she's no longer there. I turn to see one of the old security guards walking down to me. As he's coming down, I realize how cold I am. I'm shivering fiercely, worse than when I fell through a frozen pond. My hair is frozen, literal ice. Had and still have hair past my shoulder blades. I have frozen tear tracks running down my face. Probably had early stages of hypothermia. The guard finally gets to me and sees my condition and rushes me to the guard station. It's now 4:30 a.m., has me covers me in like 20 blankets, and has me huddled over a gas heater. I go through the stages of extreme shivering and sweating that happens from extremely cold situations. Once I'm done shivering and can talk, he asks me what the hell I was doing out there and why I was standing in the middle of the road. I explain the doc let sleep cause my migraine, then forgot me. I get to the point where I see the girl and choke up. He just gives me a kind of knowing look and says that's good enough. Once I'm all warmed up, I get dressed and he escorts me back to my room. Never got in trouble and it never came up later. I found out later that he had been working there for like 18 years, so I guess he knew about the girl. I probably would have frozen to death if it wasn't for the fact that he had to do a walk around every few hours. Pic related it's the Google Earth view of the center. The red circle is the wellness center and the red line is where she was skipping. I have more stories, but this one was the worst. Be me. February. Chilling in my room one night. It was Friday, so my roommates went home for the weekend and had the room to myself. Invite my buddy from another room to come chill. He brought some vodka that he smuggled in. Drinking, blasting music, and playing video games. And power outage, everything's off. Very commonly lose power at least 3 times a week in the winter. We had big windows that we could open all the way, and they had no screens. Buddy leaves to go take a piss. We had communal bathrooms at the other end of the hall. Decide to open the window since the heater only has one setting and it's Australia. Leaning on the windowsill, looking out, super quiet, serene, really. Look out to my right since the building popped out a few rooms down. All of us in my dorm have a thing where if we see each other in the window, we yell back and forth at each other. Look left, see nothing, look right. I see up one floor looking out a 3rd-story window is this chick. Beautiful, I mean 10 out of 10 brunette. And she just looks at me with sadness in her eyes. Now I'm both shocked and startled at the same time, both because no chicks should be up there, it's restricted. We just look at each other for a couple minutes, then my buddy comes back. I turn around and tell him, and he's extremely shocked, so he goes to look out the window and says he didn't see her, but he saw movement. We decided to sneak up there since there's only one staircase leading up there. We go up there, look around, even call out, but nothing. So we assume it's a ghost. We both knew the history of the place. Ask around since there's a lot of different ghost and ghost rumors. Apparently in the girls' dorm she's seen a lot. They call her the Midnight Maiden. With the type of people who lived there, I was surprised to figure they would have called her something stupid. Apparently she wanders the halls from 12 to 3 a.m. They say she always disappears into the nearest room if she notices people notice her. Me being the dumbass I am, decided I'm going to try for a ghost relationship. Gonna sleep with a ghost woo. On the weekends when everyone leaves, I would sneak up to the 3rd floor and just talk to her like just one-ended conversations. I'd ask her questions and the whole shabam. Never get a response, let alone see her when I'm up there. But try anyway for like 6 months because every month or so I'll see her back in the wind. And it just killed me inside her eyes were perfect. My buddy said he saw her one night, and I know he wasn't lying because he told me about how sad her eyes were, and I never told him about that. So I got used to seeing her once a month, but on the 5th month I didn't see her. I kept trying and going and talking to her. At month 6 I gave up when I didn't see her at all. My heart was broken for her, I couldn't handle it, had me messed up for a while. Now this might seem fake and genuinely weird, but I was doing a lot of medication during this time. I'm mean. A lot so mentally and emotionally I was already fucked. But I know it wasn't a hallucination because my friend described things I didn't tell him.
Came across something in the desert not too far from Phoenix in the Table Mesa area of Arizona, just a couple hours ago. Taking some time to calm down from it now, but some shit went down. We'll tell the story if interest arises. But Jesus Christ, bros, it was kinda crazy. I'm actually concerned about things from here on, but I can't really do much about that. Went out to Table Mesa with 3 friends, drug Fat Boy and Driver. After 2 drinks, shit got weird. Started seeing silhouettes moving about. Fat Boy and Driver started hearing movement. Fat Boy heard off-sounding howling and dogs barking. Note: me and Driver had been out a couple times on our own, felt like shit was wrong, but not nearly this bad. Will Kant, if interested. Me and Fat Boy are drunk and scared because of my mother. A priestess of sorts, says something that followed us back. Well, I have one person interested, so I guess I'll start the story in Greentext. Be me, 22 years old and a regular of the spooks because my mother always taught me about spirits and shit. Also half native, so there's that. Decide to go out with a few friends, party a bit, and drink some beers. Note, we decided to do this after having some beers at a local German bar. We arrive at the area. It's like 8 p.m., dark as hell, and quiet. Only notable noises are really coming from the interstate. Decided to crack open some beers, drowning out the feeling of trespass. Almost. Hang out for a while, talking about light pollution and noises we are starting to hear coming from the northwest. Sounds like coyotes, but not quite right. We are on full alert. Even the sober driver is a little worried. 45 and a little CCW gun comes out just for good measure. Stand around armed for another few hours, drinking and trying to enjoy the time. Noises come and go. I do my best to explain the silhouettes out in the desert that are moving around with this light that's like a mile and a half away. Get arrogant. Start hollering that nothing is out there and that we just need to enjoy ourselves. Violently throw beer bottles into the desert. Shit starts getting even weirder. Dumbass me throws beer bottles into the desert in a show of arrogance. Start feeling sick moments later, regardless of small quantities of alcohol consumed. Still keeping an eye around the perimeter, which is really just a 200-foot circle around the driver's car. Driver is feeling really scared for whatever reason, and he's sober. Starts talking about movement in the brush. Friends listen, but still only hear distant gunshots and the dogs in the distance. However, I do hear what he's talking about. Sounds like something moving low and slow through the light brush towards the mesa itself. Go to investigate and notice that between public and state land, there is no actual barbed wire, which is rare for out here. Decide to remain close to the car, not only to avoid getting lost and getting attacked by skinwalkers, but because all but one of us are drunk, so better safe than sorry. My dumbass needs to take a leak and decide to walk out about 20 or 25 feet to the south with the 45. Get out of the noticeable sight of friends. Start pissing in the bush. Heard the driver and fat friend call out and say they hear something moving not too far away. Shine light to my left. Light reflects off of what appears to be eyes, no more than 10 feet away. Panic and backpedal, tucking my junk away and raising pistol, fall into a low, standing cactus. As I'm scrambling to get out of the cactus, I feel something with long, sharp, and bony fingers. And I know it was no cactus. Grab at my shoulder. Friends still about 20 feet away. Oh my nope.jpg. Scramble on my hands and heels back towards the light of a friend's phone light. Press back against the car. Call out what happened. Hand 45 to Fat Bro and start pulling cactus thorns out of my legs, still trying to logically make sense of what just happened. Within minutes, we all hear movement on all sides, seemingly out of nowhere. Sounds like a group of people running around. At this point, everyone starts panicking, sober driver dude included. Driver gets in car and fires it up, shining headlights into desert, doesn't reveal anything. Still shining phone lights in all directions, trying to spot what's making the noise, finding nothing. Call out for people to get in and that we're getting out of there. Drug bro being resistant to getting into car. Fat bro takes his gun and shoves him into the car. I yell at Fat bro to get in the car. Follow behind. Feel like something is going to come out of the darkness. Fat bro gets in. Driver is calling for me to get in. I'm backing towards the car, slowly and carefully. The adrenaline is pumping really hard at this point. Try to get in. And the driver, being the idiot he is, almost runs my ass over, but I manage to get in. Hightail it back to Phoenix. I'm still panicking about getting grab, but now I'm feeling calm enough to actively describe the feeling. Friends tell me to talk to my mom about it, make sure I'm not marked or anything. Long story short, my mother can confirm that something followed us back, and without mentioning where I was sitting in the car, she claimed to hear a low but heavy breathing from the back seat. In the seat I had been sitting in like 10 minutes prior to her checking. I'm going back tomorrow with Mom and Fat Bro to clean up beer bottles since now Fat Bro tells me he also chucked a bottle out into the desert. But I've been feeling uneasy since, and so has Fat Bro. Sorry if this isn't nearly as interesting as you all hoped, but Jesus Christ, it was a shit show to go through. I might have neglected some details, but no, this isn't some Cancer Fleshgate, Skinwalker, or Goatman story.
Hello/X/. This event happened in mid-July 2015. I lived in Montana, outside of a rural community with a population of about 2,000. During this time, I lived in a small, one-floor ranch home by myself. My nearest neighbor lived 1 mile away and was a farmer. I never had many strange encounters leading up to this one, but the woods by my house always had an ominous feel to it. Soon after moving in, I realized why the previous homeowners left pretty quickly. I'd start to hear noises in the woods. These weren't just any noises, but what sounded like blood-curdling screams and growls. After some research, I learned that even something like a raccoon or bobcat can make these unnatural noises, and chalked it up to be that. But still, it just never felt right. It's hard to explain, but I never felt like this before, and it was just something about the woods around my house that made me uncomfortable, like I was always being watched. The first experience I couldn't explain happened about 2 weeks after I moved in. There was a thunderstorm, and the thunder was loud enough to keep me awake. I never did feel comfortable in storms by myself. The lighting was crazy and would light up the whole surrounding area for a fraction of a second. I was lying on the couch and got up to get a glass and a drink at the sink. It was about 2 a.m. if I recall correctly. Above it, there's a small window that gives a view of my yard leading up to the tree line. When the next flash of lightning hit, I saw it. Admittedly, it wasn't a long view, but it gave me enough time to see whatever this thing was. It was near the tree line, just a few steps into my yard. At first, I thought it was a bear, but it wasn't. It was standing on 2 legs with its face pointed towards the house. Its legs were like a dog's, and I could clearly make out the hocks. It was hard to tell the color of the fur, but it was dark. Its upper body was massive, with a wide torso and arms that could almost reach the ground from standing. The strangest thing is how the upper body seemed to dwarf the lower body. After standing there, frozen in shock, I waited for the next lightning strike, but when it happened, it wasn't there. It happened so quickly and was gone so quickly. After that, I bought a gun and would sleep with it within arm's reach. The next encounter is what I consider the most frightening thing of my life. For several weeks, nothing worth noting happened. I don't get cable where I live, and one night I was watching something and my satellite kept acting up. I didn't like going outside at night, but this would be quick. I just had to move the antenna a little bit. Nothing had happened for a few weeks, so I decided to just go out and do it. I grabbed my gun and flashlight and went out. The first thing I noticed was the eerie quietness that surrounded me. This time of year at night, the woods are active with all types of creatures. Not tonight. Despite the fear I was developing, I made my way over to the satellite and began to adjust it. I heard a small snap of a stick and quickly turned to my left and shined the light toward the direction of the noise. What I saw will horrify me for the rest of my life. I was immediately met with red eyes. These eyes were the color of blood, and they were evil. The head of this thing looked like a mutated German shepherd. I don't like to say it, but it looked like a werewolf. A long snout and pointed ears. The fur was black and shaggy in some places. I could see this creature's extremely developed musculature, and it dwarfed even the biggest humans on Earth. It was half in and half out of the woods, almost crouching, and it still came up to my head at 6 feet. Fully standing, this thing would have been 8 feet, I estimated. I was about 20 feet from this thing. I didn't even consider my gun, which I thought would protect me. Chances are, in hindsight, the little .223 bullets would have just pissed this thing off before it tore me to shreds. I backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact with it. I gently picked up my gun and my fight-or-flight reflexes kicked in. I chose flight. Maybe not the best option, but even if I stayed there, this thing would kill me. I ran the fastest I ever have in my life and didn't turn back once. I have no idea if it was pursuing me. I got in the house, locked every door and window, covered the blinds, and sat with my back against the wall, cradling the gun the entire night. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night and very few the following days. To make a long story short, I don't live there anymore. People often talk of Sasquatch being harmonious with nature and living within the ecosystem. Sure, if you see one, it might be scary, but it's probably more awe than anything. With this thing, it was totally different. It felt unnatural. It was sinister. It felt evil. It was stalking me, toying with me, and I believe it would have killed me. I have never seen nor experienced this feeling again in my life. It is a memory I try to put past me, but I still get nightmares about it. I think until the day I die, I will always have the image burned into my memory. The best image I have seen that fits the description of the creature is the werewolf from the movie The Howling.
The cleaner. There's a little secret inside County View Hospital. You learn about it as a part of training day. You get gathered into separate groups and then taken around an in-depth tour of the department your job is focused in. You're then shown a brief tour for the rest of the hospital, given a slight mention that you'll get used to the rest of the place the more you work here. And then when you're taken to the morgue, that's when you'll be shown the secret. We don't house any monsters here, in case you're wondering. No ghouls or beasts that eat any corpses or workers that come their way. I can promise you that. But it is a dangerous thing. There's a good reason that even if you won't work in the morgue, you're given an in-depth explanation about it. The thing in question is an experimental machine that's designed to emulsify corpses. The machine achieves this with an acid shower, melting the flesh and organs away into liquid while the bones are left intact. There's no official name for the thing, but I like to call it the cleaner, since at the end it gives the skeleton a bleach-white look to it. The cleaner looks like an iron coffin with some glass on its left and right side to see how the emulsifying is coming along. Underneath the coffin are some polyethylene tubes that lead down into a large bucket for the mixture of liquids, which tends to come out as a sort of blackened sludge to be thrown out. It sits inside the middle of the morgue, its sleek and dark gray look contrasting with the muddied whites of the walls, floors, and ceiling. To ensure that any new trainees are careful with the machine, we are told the story about Stephen. Stephen was a morgue's assistant, a young man who had just gotten the job as recently as we did. He was a smart and charming man, albeit one who was clumsy and forgetful. He did his best to make up for those flaws by following the routine related to the machine as closely as he possibly could. It was a night shift job, and it had all begun when examination of the body had ended and when permission had been granted by the relatives of the deceased. He'd carter the body inside the coffin and let it rest inside. He'd close the mini doors on the top and bottom sides of the coffin. Then he'd push the red button on the bottom side of the coffin and let it work its magic. While it melted the body, he'd prepare himself by dressing up in a protective suit, complete with gas mask and gloves. Once the machine was finished, he'd wheel the skeleton out from the coffin and bring it to one of the lockers. For the bucket, he'd carry it towards a specially made waste container before taking that to waste disposal. It wouldn't take a genius to figure out that, on one of these days, something went wrong. In actuality, a few things went wrong. Most of them were beyond Stephen's control, aside from some key mistakes. The first mistake was the body that was to be melted. For a lack of a better way of putting this, it was a fat man's corpse. Its weight exceeded what was generally recommended for the machine, yet the hospital had already signed off on the body being emulsified. To be on the safe side, Stephen opted to use a larger bucket to carry all of the mixture at once for when it needed to be moved. The second mistake was entirely on Stephen and his charms. As he had pushed the button and gotten the cleaner to work, he received a call from a girlfriend of his. She was someone he had met at the hospital. The one in charge of the tour says she was just leaving work and wanted to see how he was doing. He was in the middle of getting his protective gear on when the call came, and Stephen couldn't help himself in getting distracted. When he finished the call, the machine had finished its duty. The third mistake he made was zipping up his suit and heading towards the machine without his gas mask or gloves. He felt rushed. He didn't want to fall behind schedule and risk getting reprimanded. He carefully brought the skeleton to its locker and then went to pick up the pocket. The first mistake that was made was starting to become realized as the mixture of liquid flesh and acid was a lot heavier than Stephen realized. It wasn't impossible to lift. It only took more effort than Stephen used to. Since it was a night shift job, everyone else had gone home for the night. Not wanting to leave a job undone, he got to work carrying the bucket to the waste disposal container. The penultimate mistake was not noticing the bucket had overflowed. Some of the mixture had leaked onto the floor. Holding the bucket up to his chest, Stephen couldn't see the mess on the floor, and he walked directly on top of it. With a quick slip onto his back, the mixture splashed on top of him. The last mistake was not even his fault, but the hospital's. The protective suit could only protect itself from low concentrations of acid. Even with the massive dilution of liquid flesh, it wasn't enough to protect Stephen. He wasn't found until hours later when one of the janitors went to do his work there. The smell was already overpowering before the door was even opened. The janitor had to hold a cloth up to his mouth before he could go inside. Once the door was opened, he found Stephen lying on the floor. He had been trying to get to the sink, resting on his stomach with one of his arms outstretched, a meter or so from the sink. A river of pink and red blood followed him, with bits and pieces of internal organs mixed in. His back was dotted with large holes that only showed Stephen's skeleton, a thick and viscous sludge, and the floor underneath him. When his body was turned over, his face was unrecognizable. A half-melted eyeball, his teeth and his hair were the only clues that showed who he was. What was left of his face was turning into a sort of brownish sludge, mixed in with some dark reds and blacks. A light shade of pink came through in the middle of it all, his brain matter leaking through what remained of his nose. It took weeks for the smell to eventually pass. Months for both the janitor and Stephen's girlfriend to start making progress on the road to mental recovery, all because of some little mistakes that piled up into the death of an innocent man. Moral of the story: don't fuck with the cleaner and it won't fuck with you.
Be me a decade ago. Be 18, go to a dodgy theme park with the family we saw passing through on the way to the holidays. Get on a toboggan ride. Little card with no seatbelt and a brake level. Metal half tube held together in segments with rivets, etc. Go up and down 4 or 5 times. About to leave, decide to go again. Rivet pops while I'm going past a segment. Metal tube curls up and cuts a 1/4 inch through my neck. Haven't realized yet. Dad's running over while I'm getting off the ride. Wow, that was so crazy, haha. Pass out, in and out of consciousness on the hospital bed, blackout, become fully and completely aware and conscious, still in a void, not in a hospital, can't feel, taste, see, hear, etc. A pure void. I am a disembodied consciousness in a sea of endless nothingness. Feels so good, like I'm meant to be here and this is where I belong. The place feels familiar. As I come to this realization, everything starts coming back to me. The universe. Our connection to everything. I see everything, I feel everything everyone feels all at once. I feel myself becoming one with everything and fading into blissful sleep. Boom, wake up in hospital, docs just stabilized me. A load of stitches in my neck, literally less than a millimeter from hitting the primary artery. Immediately furious and demanded they send me back. Why the fuck did you bring me back? Fighting back, sedated, wake up later, no memory of fighting back. Was told what I said, did after waking up for the first time. No longer fear death. I look forward to that place now, whatever it is.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.